My parents tried really hard to raise me gender.
The term they be is becoming more and more
My parents tried really hard to raise me gender.
The term they be is becoming more and more
Pink is for girls, blue is for boys.
Apparently, buying pink is political. Buying beige is political. Buying trucks is political. Buying dolls is political. Calling your child strong is political. Calling your child beautiful is political. Even buying a baby grow somehow says something about your worldview. Wait, what? Modern parenting has become a performance, and nowhere is that more obvious than two little words: gender neutral. So, your son only wants monster truck. Your daughter has suddenly decided everything she owns must be aggressively, violently pink.
I'm drowning in sequins.
But you spent years carefully avoiding stereotypes. You bought the wooden toys. You never told your son he couldn't cry. You let your daughter climb trees. You deliberately mixed dolls and dinosaurs into the same toy box.
Somehow I've ended up with a frilly princess and a monster truck lover who insists that pink is for girls. Oh, where did it all go wrong?
Judging by the internet, yes. Apparently your child has become evidence against your politics. Except children are not political projects, they're just people. And I actually think we've accidentally turned gender-neutral parenting into another impossible parenting standard. Another identity parents feel they have to form perfectly. So, today I want to talk about something slightly different. Not how to raise gender-neutral children, but how to raise humans. Hi, I'm Jessica Kergren-Bozard. On this channel we talk about history, disability, LGBTQ+ life and parenting, and usually discover that humans have always been far more complicated than neat little categories allow. I'm a disabled lesbian mother raising 3 children, well, child and 2 babies, with my wife, and because of that people assume our children are being raised in some kind of gender-neutral social experiment. They're not. They're just being raised. It's very tiring. I cannot. But I've recently been having the same conversations over and over with other parents.
We always dressed them very neutrally. We didn't have pink or sparkles or even skirts. And now she insists on dressing like a Disney princess every single day. We feel like awful parents.
You're not. Take it from someone who has steered away from pink bows as a child and then found them later on. We went into parenting with the intention of not creating automatic boxes within our child's consciousness into which toys, clothes, or people might fit. Think about it in the sense that from a young age you're taught what a boy is and what a girl is, so you sort of build these boxes in your mind, and as you encounter something new you must learn into which box it goes. As an adult you can take everything out of the boxes, or you can discover something or someone new and consciously make the effort to not put them into those boxes, but the boxes are still there, just sitting in your mental attic. So we deliberately did not want to create those boxes within our child's mind.
So you raise it as they be?
No, we just didn't say, this is the boys section of the shop. Instead we said, choose whatever you want to try on from anywhere in the shop. And he said, absolutely. But I've noticed something fascinating in the online conversation. The phrase gender-neutral parenting has become almost meaningless. The internet tends to divide this conversation into 2 camps. Gender-neutral parenting is ideological indoctrination. Gender-neutral parenting means pretending gender doesn't exist. But both misunderstand what most parents are actually trying to do. Part 1. Pressure of the label. Gender-neutral parenting means different things to different families because there are no strict rules, and families adopt the philosophy across a wide spectrum. It's a parenting style that aims to avoid imposing gender norms or stereotypes on a child. This allows them to explore their own interests and identities without being told that certain things are for boys or for girls. This can range from simply but mindfully removing strict toy and colour stereotypes, as we did, to choosing not to tell extended friends, family and the public what the baby's sex is. As the chair of the Counselling and Higher Education Department at Northern Illinois University, Suzanne Diggs-White, explained to The Bump, this practice is designed to keep other people from placing gender-based stereotypes and expectations on a child. The approach generally breaks down into these varying levels. At the first level, we have challenging stereotype. Parents keep their child's biological sex known, but consciously avoid pushing traditional gender roles. They decorate the nursery in neutral, non-gendered colours.
That doesn't mean it has to be beige.
They provide a wide range of toys and clothes in a range of colours and styles so that children can express themselves freely without being restricted by for boys or for girls labels. They can sign up for any sport they fancy, and you'll encourage that extracurricular activity even though they're the only boy or girl there and the other parents look at you a bit funny, because it's what the child loves and that's the only important thing. There's then the mid-step of gender creative parenting. As explained by YouTuber Marcus Bones, the focus here is treating gender as something the child defines later in life rather than a label assigned at birth, and just involves proactively challenging assumptions. Parents choose gender-neutral names, avoid gendered pronouns, and encourage exploration of diverse gender roles, but the child and the people around them are aware of their biological sex. And then there are babies, the most extreme end of the spectrum that documentary makers just love to talk about. Parents conceal their baby's biological sex from everyone, including extended family and friends, potentially even siblings, and the child themselves, and raise them using they/them pronouns. This is done to completely protect the child from any implicit biases or external expectations.
Because you just know grandma's going to say something.
Most parents who describe themselves as raising children gender neutrally aren't trying to erase gender. They're trying to remove unnecessary restriction. The intention is to encourage personal expression and respect for individuality, whilst avoiding gender stereotypes that often limit children's opportunities. Those stereotypes can perpetuate harmful beliefs about what boys or girls should be or can do, and children are allowed to explore their identities and interests freely. By not limiting children through predetermined gender norms, this style of parenting aims to foster healthier self-esteem and relationships. The problem is that gender neutral has become a stick to beat ourselves with, rather than a parenting tool.
Why can't I do it right? I'm a bad parent.
No, you're not.
How do you know?
Because you're worried about being one. Interestingly, a recent Australian study of parents with children aged 0 to 5 found that many parents were motivated by giving children freedom from restrictive stereotypes, but also described significant practical barriers and uncertainty about what gender-neutral parenting actually meant.
Not assigning our children a gender, which is different than not assigning them a sex. Birth certificates for both children have their observed sex at birth, but socially, we use gender-neutral language until they are old enough to tell us their own preferences.
We've raised our kids to be fairly gender-neutral. We don't do stereotypes in our house, we don't do gender roles, colours are for everyone, toys are for everyone, clothes are for everyone.
So, which one are we arguing about?
Good question. For me, gender-neutral parenting with my first child meant not putting gendered restrictions on his toys or clothes. You want the glittery pink sandals? Don't we all? Referring to him as my child rather than my son, asking his opinion and signing him up for ballet because it interested him, rather than football with all of the other boys from his class, and repeatedly expressing that we have always and will always love him for who he is inside. I also went really hard on the, oh, that boy at the playground said your beloved rainbow top is a girl's top? How odd. I suppose he just doesn't know that clothes don't have a gender. How sad for him. Oh well, when he realises that, he can have his own rainbow top. Won't that be nice? Kill them with kindness. Do we live in the gay capital of the UK? Yes. Are we surrounded largely by other parents who are doing exactly the same thing? Yes. But again, most parents aren't trying to erase gender, they're just trying to avoid making gender the most important thing about their child. Does it sound odd that I am talking about this whilst looking like this? Yes, I realise. I see that. But that's kind of the point. We now have 2 daughters, and because they are twins, and we try really hard not to make their twin identity, the most important thing about them. We started off by calling them the babies and have now progressed to calling them the girls.
Ooh.
Indeed. So, am I failing too? Part 2. The failed ideal. Modern parenting has become an identity. Not just something we do, something we perform.
Why does buying a pink cardigan suddenly feel like you're making a political statement? Why does choosing a nursery become a referendum on your values? Why does every parenting decision seem to carry the weight of shaping an entire future human?
I don't actually think this conversation starts with gender, but with something much bigger. I think we've accidentally turned parenting into a performance. Not because parents are vain, not because parents are attention-seeking. Some of them are. Some of them are. If you see a kid's channel on YouTube, you see a child with an Instagram, it's not that child that's vain. Because modern parenting increasingly asks us not just to raise children, but to demonstrate to ourselves and to everyone else that we are raising them correctly. And before anyone says,
Parents have always worried.
yes, of course they have. Parents have always loved their children. Parents have always wanted them to thrive. That isn't new. What is relatively new is the sheer number of parenting decisions that become moral decisions. Disposable nappies? Moral. Breastfeeding? Moral. Screen time? Moral. Baby-led weaning? Moral. Sleep training? Moral. Emotional regulation? Moral. Organic food? Moral. Baby classes? Moral. Plastic toys? Moral. Wooden toys? Also somehow moral.
And now gender expression has joined the list.
It's exhausting. Not because these questions don't matter, many of them do, but because every choice starts to feel like a reflection of who you are, rather than just simply what works for your family. We had to make a lot of choices with the twins, because they were preemies that I know were not hugely popular with other parents in our circle. Not that they would say anything, ever, or necessarily judge her, but also they're not the moral choices they would have made. Psychologists have been noticing this shift for quite some time. In 1996, sociologist Sharon Hayes coined the term intensive mothering. She described an emerging expectation that good parenting should be child-centered, emotionally absorbing, expert-guided, labor-intensive, and financially expensive. In other words, parenting was increasingly framed as a project requiring constant optimization rather than something learned through experience and community. Nearly 30 years later, that pressure has not gone away. It's now intensive parenting with added Wi-Fi. Modern parenting often feels less like raising children and more like sitting an exam you didn't know you were taking. Now friends, let's be clear. I am absolutely not mocking parents who read books. I read parenting books. I have even made videos recommending my favourite parenting books to you. And I am certainly not mocking parents who think carefully about how they want to raise their children. I am one of them, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Intentional parenting has given us genuinely positive conversations about children's emotions, consent, respectful communication, disability inclusion, mental health, and so much more. Our understanding of children has improved enormously. Children deserve that. They will have much cheaper therapy bills than us. The problem isn't intentional parenting. The problem is when intentional parenting quietly becomes performative parenting. When every tiny decision begins to feel like evidence. Evidence that you're a good parent or a bad one.
I've never even let her near a hair bow. Where did she get this? It can't be any of the other parents at school. What will they say?
That it's a cute hair bow? Don't ask me. All of my children love hair bows. Probably because I wear them too.
But it's not right. It's simply too obvious.
Social media doesn't just amplify that pressure, it rewards certainty. You either become crunchy, Montessori, attachment, free range, gentle, gender neutral, whatever the Mormons call what they do, traditional.
Why are there so many Mormons on Instagram?
Everything becomes an identity, not simply a tool. The algorithm doesn't particularly like, here's a nuanced discussion acknowledging there are lots of different families and every child is unique. No. The algorithm prefers
5 things emotionally intelligent parents never say. 3 things that ruin your child's creativity. Everything you've been told about boys is wrong.
And now also apparently, hair bows are too obvious. Because certainty spreads nuance and takes about half an hour. Lucky for us. I hope you have some nice tea, a little snack, a Diet Coke if that's more your thing. You know I have one. I don't think it's just the rise of social media that's driving our parenting perfectionism though. There is another way in which we differ from our great-grandparents when it comes to parenting, other than the lack of a team of nannies. Having children has become much more intentional. Across much of Europe and North America, people are having fewer children than previous generations, and they're having them later in life. In 1800, women in the UK typically bore 5 to 8 children. Because of high infant mortality, not all children reached adulthood, so an average of 5 to 6 children survived to maturity. The average fertility rate in the UK is now 1.4 children. Yes, so low we have to start dividing up the children. Oh, I've just realised we're a two-man family with 3 children, so we also fit the statistic. I don't know how I feel about that. Are we meant to have another one now? In the United States in 1800, the average was slightly higher at 7 to 8 children, and it is now 1.6 children. I'm sure you've heard all of this from the pronatalists, but apparently this is supposedly a disaster. But many families spend years trying to conceive, navigating infertility, IVF, adoption, fostering, or complex family building journeys. And even when none of these experiences are part of the story, becoming a parent is often a carefully considered decision rather than just an expectation of adulthood or an inevitability as it used to be. It is a choice.
As it should be.
That changes something. Not our love for our children, obviously. Our great-great-grandparents didn't love their children less because they had more of them. Perhaps it changes the weight we place upon parenthood. When you've imagined someone years, read the books, listened to the podcasts, decorated the nursery, thought deeply about the kind of parent you hope to be, it becomes very easy to believe, perhaps without even realising it. If you simply make enough good decisions, the future will unfold accordingly, and everything will be fine.
This is fine.
Except children are gloriously inconvenient. They don't know what aesthetic you've chosen. They don't understand the identity you've built around your parenting style. They just simply arrive, already themselves in countless tiny ways. Not fully formed or destined, but definitely not blank either. Developmental psychologist Jerome Kagan, whose work on infant temperament reshaped how psychologists think about early personality, argued that children come into the world with different temperamental dispositions. Decades of research since then have reinforced that development is the product of ongoing interactions between biology, relationships, and environment. It's not a simple matter of parental design, which means parents matter enormously, but we're never the only influence.
Oh, that's actually incredibly comforting.
Isn't it? Before Rupert was born, Claude and I schooled ourselves on how to not say, "Be careful," or "Watch out," when our future baby would be attempting to climb up the walls or swinging all the way to the top of the swing set. It's a Montessori thing. You don't want to crush their drive to explore and experiment whilst also building them up to, create their own inner safety mechanisms. Do I feel safe climbing this? Where can I put my foot next? Rather than, my mum is telling me this isn't safe. I need her to come rescue me. And you know what? He didn't move. He didn't climb the walls. He was not interested in the swings. He was very content just sitting and reading his book. We were so ready to not do the thing we weren't meant to do, and he gave us zero opportunity. Although we do now have a mini climber. Yeah, one of the two. But she's so fast, it's more of a, look at that. She's at the top again already. How did that happen?
Yes, Gus. What are you doing on there?
And again, zero opportunity to not say the thing we had practiced not saying.
Looking for a career that surprises you every day? Have you considered parenthood?
So maybe trying to specifically be gender-neutral parents is much the same. The label has just become another impossible parenting ideal. All modern parenting styles carry this unspoken promise. If you choose the correct parenting philosophy, your child will become kind, confident, emotionally intelligent, anti-racist, creative, securely attached, gender-expansive, a healthy eater, and a good sleeper. The implication is that the right input creates the right output. But child development doesn't work like software. Children arrive with temperament. Peers matter, schools matter, advertising matters, sibling matters, culture matters, chance matters. Parents matter enormously, but not exclusively. And if parenting is about engineering the perfect child, we are always going to feel like we're failing. Right, it's okay. Pull yourself back from the pit. It's okay. But if we see parenting as just meeting another human being, learning who they are, supporting them as they grow, suddenly success looks very different. It's not, does my son really like trucks? Or does my daughter really want pink? But did my child know they were loved enough to tell me who they really were? And I think that's a much kinder question for both of you. But look, children don't just absorb the world around them. They spend an astonishing amount of time trying to make sense of it. And it turns out one of the very first ways they do that is by becoming tiny little categorizing machines. So let's talk about why toddlers become absolutely obsessed with gender rules. Part 3. Tiny scientists. Why children love rules. So, you've done everything right. You bought a lovely mixture of books. You've never told your son that dolls are for girls. You've never told your daughter she has to like princesses. You've carefully avoided making gender a big deal. And then, one Tuesday morning, your 4-year-old looks you dead in the eye and says, pink is for girls.
I'm dead. Excuse you? Where did that come from?
Have they picked it up at nursery? Is this their big cousins? Was it grandma? Was it that one episode of Peppa Pig when I had norovirus? Have I accidentally ruined everything? And before we answer any of those questions,
Probably was Peppa Pig, though.
I think we need to understand something really important about young children. They are constantly trying to solve an enormous puzzle. Imagine arriving in a world where absolutely everything is new. You don't know what a dog is, or a bus, or a spoon, or why some people wear glasses, or why adults disappear to work, but it's actually the room right next door to your bedroom and you can still hear them in there, or why everyone keeps asking whether you'd like another banana, even though you very clearly found the first one on the floor.
Why am I not learning?
Everything is information. Everything needs organising. Everything needs a category. Developmental psychologist Jean Piaget argued that children actively build mental frameworks or schemas to organise new information. It's those boxes I was telling you about. Modern developmental psychology has refined many of Piaget's ideas, but that central insight has endured. Children aren't passive recipients of knowledge. They're constantly constructing understanding by looking for patterns in the world around them. In other words, toddlers are tiny scientists, and unfortunately, they are scientists with very little data. Once they notice a pattern, they'll often become very committed to it. You'll know this if you've ever been corrected by a 3-year-old.
No, Mama, my top isn't orange. It's peach.
Or
No, dinosaurs were real, not are real.
Or my personal favourite, a toddler confidently explaining something that is objectively, spectacularly incorrect, and yet completely logical based on the tiny amount of information they've gathered so far.
All bald men are called Tom. My teacher and my friend's dad are both bald and both called Tom. Therefore, all balds are Tom and all Toms are bald.
Gender works much the same way. Children notice patterns. Some people have long hair, some people have short hair. Some people wear dresses, some people don't. Some people are called he, some people are called she. And half of my class has pink pegs, and half of them have blue. They're looking for rules. Not because they're trying to be restrictive, but because rules make the world feel understandable and a bit safer when you're really tiny. Psychologist Sandra Bem's gender schema theory supports this, suggesting that children actively build mental frameworks about gender from the culture around them, sorting information into categories that just help them to make sense of the social world. Those schemas emerge through interaction with the wider environment, not simply through parental instruction. Children don't simply copy adults word for word. They notice patterns, test ideas, and sort experiences into categories that help them to understand the social world. Bem's book, The Lenses of Gender, Transforming the Debate on Sexual Inequality, identifies 3 recurring cultural lenses. Androcentrism, which treats the male experience as the default human standard. Gender polarization, which exaggerates differences between women and men. And biological essentialism, which attributes social differences to natural biology. These lenses work together to make existing gender arrangements appear natural, inevitable, and self-evident. Bem argues that they shape everything, from workplace expectations to family roles and personal identity. And that, should we wish to challenge any of these assumptions before they become naturalized for our children, we need to do so openly, clearly, and loud. It's not just about putting the baby in the gender-neutral beige baby grow. It's about pointing out gender inequality when you see it and labeling it as a bad thing, so your child knows exactly which mental box to put that interaction into.
So I haven't been doing enough? God, I knew I was failing as a mother.
No, and honey, you should really talk to a professional about those feelings. Neither Sandra Bem nor I are blaming you for social reality. That's ridiculous. Gender inequality is not merely a result of individual prejudice or one parent's failings. Entire social systems reproduce gendered expectations and power relations. The important thing is this: schemas aren't prisons, they're drafts. Young children often create very rigid rules precisely because they're still learning. As they grow, meet more people, read more books, go to more birthday parties, watch more television, encounter more exceptions, those rules become more flexible. The categories stretch. The world gets bigger. Your 4-year-old insisting that pink is for girls isn't evidence that you failed as a parent. It's actually an invitation to respond.
Well, actually,
The goal isn't to make girls play with trucks, it's to make it clear that if she wants trucks, great. If she wants dolls, also great. If she wants both, fantastic.
oh, and if she changes daily, welcome to toddlerhood.
But I actually had one of these moments recently. So Rupert has always been a lover of pink, sparkles, ballet and little princess dolls. It has always felt like my role as a parent to protect that, to not allow other children or adults make him think that any of those things are not for him, that they are for girls and that it's wrong that he should like those things. Those are just things for people who like those things. There's no gender attached to clothes and toys. But he's recently built this really lovely group of friends who happen to be boys, and he's become interested more in some of their toys and activities. Pokemon, Playmobil nights, Ninja Lego. And what surprised me wasn't Rupert, it was me. I was shocked that my son was choosing stereotypical boy toys. This tiny voice in the back of my head said, have I done something wrong? And I had to stop myself, because wrong according to whom? I had spent all of this time telling him that clothes and toys have no gender, and that has to go for all clothes and all toys. I realised I had become attached to an outcome. If my goal really is for my children to become themselves, then surely I can't only celebrate that journey when it leads somewhere unexpected. Otherwise, I'm not actually giving them freedom. I'm just quietly hoping they choose the version of freedom I personally find the most satisfying. And that was a humbling realisation.
He has some good cards, though.
He hasn't stopped loving ballet and sparkles, he's just broadened his horizons, and I should do the same. I think this is something many progressive parents quietly experience, but don't often admit out loud. We've spent years challenging restrictive gender stereotypes.
Quite rightly.
We've celebrated boys who love ballet and girls who love engineering, children who don't fit neat little boxes. And that is really important. But sometimes, without even noticing, we begin to see stereotype breaking itself as the desirable outcome. So when our son adores diggers, or our daughter wants absolutely everything she owns to be bright pink, we feel this tiny flicker of disappointment. Not because of what our child has done, but because we worry it says something about us, about our politics, about our parenting, about whether we've somehow failed. And I don't think that's fair. Not to parents, and certainly not to children. Our children aren't empty hard drives waiting to receive perfect parenting. And they aren't performing our values, they're just discovering themselves. And that discovery is rarely neat. One week, they'll be obsessed with dinosaurs. The next week, fire engines. Then ballet, then worms, then the colour purple, then absolutely refusing to wear socks because apparently socks are oppressive now. Childhood is wonderfully experimental, messy, contradictory and full of phrases. Some last a week, some last a lifetime. Our job isn't to know which is which. Our job is to support and stay curious alongside them.
You are definitely not bringing those worms into the house. I am very supportive of your scientific dreams, darling, but that is a step too far.
And I think that's where the phrase gender-neutral parenting sometimes lets us down, because it sounds as though the goal is neutrality, as though we're aiming for the absence of gender. But I don't think that's actually what most people want. I don't want all of my children to be at the neutral point of the gender dial. I just want them to feel free to move that dial wherever they please. I am quite clearly not in the centre. Freedom means my child might grow into someone gloriously gender non-conforming. It also means they might liken things our culture currently associates with their own gender. Neither outcome proves anything, except that they felt supported enough to become themselves. Nobody gets to control every variable. Your politics are not just proven because your son loves diggers. And your daughter is depressed because she loves glitter, believe me. Agency matters. Choice matters.
But children don't explore the world in isolation. What do I do when grandma comes to stay with a bright pink gift bag and a bright blue gift bag?
Yes, even if your home is the most accepting place imaginable, sooner or later, the rest of the world joins the conversation. That's where things get much more complicated. Part 4. The village has opinions. There's an old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And I actually think that's true, even if, like us, you don't have a very hands-on village. Children don't just learn from parents, they learn from grandparents, teachers, neighbours, friends, books, television, the internet, the random lady in Tesco who has somehow appointed herself head of baby commentary. I know they are not wearing hats. We don't put them in hats nowadays.
2 years ago, an old man in a shop mockingly said, "What's your name? Oh, not answering. Is it Mr. Nobody?" And that started a rolling identity crisis that we've been living with every day ever since. Why don't people realise the weight of their words?
One of the things that I have found most fascinating about becoming a parent is how quickly other people begin narrating your child. Not asking who they are, not waiting to see who they become, just narrating. This one's going to be trouble. She's such a flirt. He's definitely going to be sporty. Oh, she's the clever one. That's your dramatic child. They're usually trying to connect. I mean, they're making conversation, they're expressing affection, but they're also doing something else. They're writing the opening chapter of someone else's story. Gender-neutral parenting is relatively easy inside your own home, but more challenging when you step outside. It's interesting how often we heard the words brother, son, and boy after we added twin girls to the family. People were quick to make a differentiation between them when we had always used the words child and sibling. And I don't think this only happens with gender. It happens with disability, race, class, and even personality. Human beings seem to have this irresistible urge to look at tiny children and just immediately begin predicting who they're going to become, as though toddlers are fortune cookies.
Oh, what an adorable future accountant.
Except they're not. They're people, and people have a habit of surprising us. Studies by researchers, including Lisa Elliott, argue that many behavioural differences between boys and girls are amplified by socialisation rather than fixed biological destiny, as adults often unconsciously reinforce gendered play, even when they believe they're treating children equally. In Pink Brain, Blue Brain, How Small Differences Grow into Troublesome Gaps and What We Can Do About It, Elliott examines research on sex differences in children's brain development and finds that many observed differences between boys and girls arise from the interaction of small biological differences with powerful environmental and cultural influences, rather than from fundamentally different brains. Through examining studies on neuroscience, developmental psychology, and neuroplasticity, Elliott contends that infant brains are highly adaptable. She argues that while some average biological differences exist at birth, they're generally modest, and parents, teachers, peers, and social expectations often magnify them over time.
Yes, boys do generally perform better in GCSE physics than girls. No, that tiny baby is probably not inherently better at physics. I mean, unless they're a genius baby, in which case, well done you. But boy, has Grandad already given you 10 different science kits when he never gave those to your sister.
Research shows that gender-segregated marketing heavily limits girls' access to STEM toys. Studies reveal that up to 89% of toys aimed at girls are pink, and only 11% are engineering-focused, whilst nearly a third of boys' toys focus on building their skills with STEM. And yes, I know, just because a toy is aimed at one child doesn't mean you can't give it to another, but researchers conducting a global survey on gender bias in toys found that whilst girls were becoming much more confident and keen to engage in a wide range of activities, the same was not true of boys. 71% of the boys surveyed feared that they would be made fun of if they played with what they described as girls' toys, fear shared by their parents. According to Madeline Denano, the chief executive of the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, who conducted the study, parents are more worried that their sons will be teased than their daughters for playing with toys associated with the other gender.
Yes, that is the Gina Davis Institute, started by the award-winning actor Gina Davis.
The study found that parents encouraged sons to do sport or STEM activities, whilst daughters were 5 times more likely to be encouraged to do dance or play dressing up. And although parents did want their daughters to have a broad range of skills, the same could not be said about their son. As Professor Gina Rippon, neurobiologist and author of The Gendered Brain, points out, there's asymmetry. We encourage girls to play with boys' stuff, but not the other way around. This is a problem since toys offer training opportunities. If girls aren't playing with Lego or other construction toys, they aren't developing the spatial skills that will help them later life. If dolls are being pushed on girls but not boys, then boys are missing out on nurturing skills. Neutral does not mean male. Until societies recognise that behaviours and activities typically associated with women are as valuable or important, parents and children will be tentative to embrace them. But embracing the child you're given, rather than one you want, is, as I'm sure many of you know, kind of an important part of this trying to be a good parent thing. And as a disabled person, I've thought about this a lot. Part 5. Disability and loving your child as they are. When you're disabled, you learn very early parents cannot design the child they'll receive. One of the things disabled adults hear over and over again is a version of the same story. Parents grieving the child they imagined, rather than getting to know the child they actually have. Now, To be absolutely clear, that grief can be very real, and it can exist alongside enormous love. Parents are allowed complicated emotions, but disability activists have spent decades asking society to make a subtle shift. Not
Lower your expectations,
but
change what you expected in the first place.
the social model of disability developed by disabled scholars and activists, including Mike Oliver, encourages us to understand disability not simply as something located within an individual body, but as something profoundly shaped by the barriers society creates. Alongside that, disabled writers have repeatedly challenged the assumption that a disabled life is inherently a lesser one. As activist and writer Eli Clare put it, "I want a world where disability is welcomed, where disability is valued." As disabled people, we have spent years arguing something society often forgets. Love your child as they are, not as you imagined them. That's true if your child is disabled. It's true if they're queer. It's true if they're trans. It's true if they're autistic. It's true if they adore football. It's true if they adore ballet. It's true if they become someone you never predicted.
You're a Tory?
Because none of us knows who our child will become. Not really. We don't even know what they'll look like. Although a shocking number of you are running your baby's photos through AI to find out.
Stop it. Put the AI down. It is not your friend.
Disabled people have been asking society to stop mourning the child they imagined and start loving the child they actually have. We don't know if they'll love Shakespeare, or football, or insect, or engineering. We don't know whether they'll be shy or loud, whether they'll become disabled, whether they will be straight, gay, bisexual, transgender, or just absolutely uninterested in any of the above. And no, you are not getting grandchildren anytime soon. Please stop asking. We simply don't know. And I think that's one of the most beautiful and terrifying things about becoming a parent. You're not meeting a project, you're meeting a mystery. I have identical twins, so my everyday is a real-life science experiment. It is fun. They share the same DNA and are being brought up in the same house by the same parents, but are incredibly different people with different abilities and personalities. They're even having really distinctive laughs. And we have to try really hard when people ask us about them to not say, this is the sociable one or this is the active one, because really each week they change. I don't want to put them into boxes. They take turns being the dominant twin depending on the situation, which brings me back to gender and irony, because sometimes in our very understandable desire to avoid putting children into boxes, we accidentally create a new box.
The little girl who isn't supposed to like pink or princesses or care about dresses. The one who is supposed to show how wonderfully stereotype-free our family is.
That's still a script. It's just written in a different font. Your child's favourite colour doesn't have to carry the weight of an entire ideological debate. It's just their favourite colour this week. Sociologist Raymond Connell argued in Gender, a World Perspective, that gender isn't just something individuals possess, it's something societies organise through everyday institutions, relationships and expectations. Families exist within a wider web of cultural messages. It's okay. If you're trying to raise your child thoughtfully, you've spent years building an accepting home, and then grandma says, boys don't cry, or the supermarket cashier says, what a sweet little princess, or nursery lines everyone up into boys and girls. It's okay. Doesn't mean you failed. It means your child just lives in a society like you do. Now let's all take some deep breaths before we yell at grandma.
Back to that whole village thing though. So I'm in England where children have to wear school uniform to go to school, and the girls can wear trousers or skirts, but she only ever wants to wear skirts because all of her friends are wearing skirts. Is it okay that she's wearing skirts and never trousers?
As a fellow never trouser, yes, of course, just buy some warm tights for the winter. The goal was never to create the one perfectly gender-neutral home untouched by culture, because that's impossible. Children need villages. They benefit from relationships with people who think differently. Sometimes they will hear ideas you disagree with. Sometimes they will come home repeating something that makes you sigh internally or makes you gasp and bring out the encyclopedia so you can spend the next hour correcting that assumption. Woo. The question isn't, how do I stop the world from influencing my child? The question is, how do I become the place they return to when they're making sense of it? Eventually your child will not remember every conversation they had in the supermarket. So many intense conversations. Or every slightly awkward comment from Great Aunt Margaret. What they'll remember is where the home felt like the place where they could safely ask questions, where changing their mind was allowed, where curiosity wasn't punished, and where they didn't have to earn love by performing the right version of themselves. Whether that version was traditionally masculine, traditionally feminine, entirely their own, or just still unfolding.
My child's preferences are not a report card on my values. My child's behaviour is not a reflection on my parenting.
Leaves us with an awkward question. If our job isn't to control who our children become, then exactly what is our job? I think the answer has surprisingly little to do with gender and almost everything to do with character. Part 6. Raising humans first. I think one of the most useful shifts we can make is, rather than focusing on identity and trying to eliminate gender, move to cultivating character instead. Swap.
You're so sweet.
For.
That was a very thoughtful thing to do.
Swap.
Good girl.
For.
You worked really hard. You should feel proud of yourself.
Swap.
What a brave boy.
For.
I saw how nervous you were, but you kept going even though it was difficult.
One describes who the child is, the other notices what they choose to do. Now, it's not about pleasing language. Please don't leave this video thinking, Jessica says I can never call my daughter beautiful again. That would mean I have spectacularly failed to convey the point. I absolutely tell my children they are gorgeous. They are gorgeous. Beauty exists. Strength exists. Gender exists. Children notice all of these things. The goal isn't pretending that they don't. The goal is making sure those things aren't the only mirrors we hand our children. Developmental psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindset suggests that children benefit when adults praise effort, strategies, and persistence, rather than treating desirable qualities as fixed traits. The strongest evidence comes from learning and achievement, rather than parenting specifically, but the broader principle is helpful. Children often flourish when they see growth as something they can actively participate in. In other words, we don't want children thinking,
I'm the clever one.
or,
I'm the sporty one.
or,
I'm the pretty one.
because what happens the first time they're not? Instead, we can notice choices. You kept going. You noticed someone was left out. You asked a really thoughtful question. That must have taken patience. Thank you for helping your sister. Curiosity, honesty, kindness, accountability, creativity, and persistence. These are qualities that belong to every human being, regardless of gender. I also think we can become a little more comfortable with saying, I don't
When I was 15 years old, I was in a cult. I've been making some short form videos about this, but everybody's wanting the story in a long form video. So that's what this video is gonna be. I'm sorry if there's a lot of cuts in the video, but this happened like 10 years ago, so I have to pull things from memory. It all started on a Tuesday morning when my parents woke me up a little bit later than they would on a school day. They told me that I needed to get a light bag packed because we were gonna go on a family vacation to Pikes Peak in Colorado. Me and my parents didn't even eat dinner together, much less go on vacations together, so that was already weird enough. I pack my bag and we get in the truck and we start heading to Colorado. Nothing really exciting happened on the car ride there. I do remember I was sitting in the back middle seat though, and I looked up front and I saw my dad was texting somebody. I couldn't quite see what the texts were saying, but I did see the word brother in the name. And so I asked, who are you texting? Because my dad didn't ever call anybody brother. It was weird. My mom told me he was just texting a good friend or something like that. Anyways, we end up getting to a hotel in Colorado late at night. We get settled in and we go to bed, and then it's the next morning. My dad sits down with me and he says, so Caitlin, the real reason we brought you here is there's this really nice family that's going to be looking after you for the next year. In that moment, I absolutely lost my mind. I don't think I have ever cried as hard as I did in those moments when I found that out. My parents were literally trying to keep me quiet because I was screaming and crying so loud. If anybody outside of the room would have heard that, they would have thought somebody was like being hurt inside. Eventually, I calm down, we get ready, and we immediately head straight over to Brother David and Miss Jen's house. This is the first time that I was introduced to the girls' home. It was just a normal house in a neighborhood. It wasn't a facility, nothing weird. You wouldn't have expected what was going on inside was actually going on in that house. Just for a little bit of context, Brother David and Miss Jen actually didn't own that house. It actually belonged to a couple in the church that was on deployment, and they just like lend them the house, I guess, so they could run the girls' home. Anyways, we get inside and the first thing I see is like maybe 10 girls all sitting down at like plastic fold-out tables. They were sitting there in collared shirts, long khaki skirts, and they were doing what looked like schoolwork. Miss Jen gets me sat down at the table so that I can start doing diagnostic testing to see where they would place me in their homeschooling. The curriculum they used was something called ACE, and they were like these little tiny packets. Miss Jen sits me down, gets me started on that, and then Miss Jen and Brother David take my parents upstairs to have a conversation alone. I didn't think my parents were actually going to leave me in this place. I thought it was just like kind of teaching me a lesson, like, oh, you don't want to live with us anymore? This is how it would be like I did not think it was real, so I didn't care about the diagnostic test, and I was just like clicking through. I wasn't paying attention to the questions. I wasn't trying to get anything right. I was just trying to get done with it. Because I wasn't actually trying, I ended up getting placed in the 3rd grade, and mind you, I'm 15 years old at the time. 3rd grade. I told Miss Jen that I just wasn't taking it seriously, and I asked if I could try it again. She would not let me try it again. We'll touch more on that here in a minute. After my parents came downstairs, they took me to a store. I think it was like a Kohl's or something. The girls' home had a strict dress code. I later learned that it wasn't just the girls' home that had the dress code, it was the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. We're at the store, we were grabbing a couple things. We couldn't really find much. We ended up heading back to the hotel to spend the last like bit of our day together. We wrapped that up and then we head to the church that the girls' home went to for their Wednesday night service. We didn't sit with the girls' home during the service. Me and my parents just sat together toward the back. I don't remember what the service was about. I obviously wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about how I was about to be left by my parents. I remember my legs were like bouncing like 90 to nothing. You would have thought that I was literally on speed. I remember my dad taking me out into the hallway because he got mad that I was shaking my legs so much. And he was like, you're not going to manipulate us into not leaving you here, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, something like that. He thought that I was just trying to like manipulate them, and I wasn't. I was just, they're leaving me. So obviously I was anxious. The service ends, and then it's time to go out to the truck to say goodbye to my parents. Wake up one morning, we're going to Colorado, go to sleep, wake up, we're leaving you here. And then that same night they were gone. I'm saying goodbye to my parents. I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm asking my mom, like, please let me stay with a family member, literally anybody else, just don't leave me here. I kept saying our goodbyes though, and then I head over to the bus where the rest of the girls are. The girls' home had like, I don't know if the actual term is like a short bus, forgive me if I'm using an offensive term, I don't know, but that's what Brother David called us, and it was literally a short school bus. I get into the bus with the rest of the girls, and then we head back to their house. They got my bunk set up with bedding and everything. All of us girls slept technically in the basement on a bunch of bunks. I don't remember if it was my first night there or if it was the next night. It was after lights out, and I heard footsteps come down the stairs, and then the lights flip on and Miss Jen is standing there with a couple of the other girls, and she tells me, get up, go to the bathroom. I get up and I go to the bathroom, and I think it was Brother David that came over to my bunk, and he just started tearing it apart. He was ripping the bedding off. He was like flipping the mattress upside down, just looking literally everywhere. I did not know what was going on. I was like, why are you guys searching me like this? I'm in the bathroom with Miss Jen and the oldest girl in the house, and they're holding up a towel in front of me, and they have me stripped down naked. And then they made me stand on one leg and shake my leg one at a time to make sure there wasn't anything in between my cheeks. I don't know. There wasn't anything. I didn't have anything on me. I didn't even know what they were looking for. Turns out that one of the girls thought she saw like a cell phone light coming from underneath the sheets, but in all reality, it was just like a street light was like coming in through the blinds at a certain angle and it just reflected off the blanket or something. It made it look like I had a screen. I did not have a screen. Obviously they didn't find a phone, but they did find a stuffed animal I was hiding in my pillowcase. It was a really important stuffed animal to me, but they took it away anyways because they said the stuffed animals are for children. They never ended up giving it back after I left the home either. Anyways, went to sleep and then it was the next morning. My first morning there, I remember I was so thirsty. Obviously, I was dehydrated from the day before. I decided to get out of bed and walk upstairs myself to go get a drink of water. And that was the first time I got in trouble because apparently we aren't allowed to come upstairs before Miss Jen comes and gets us. From here, I'm just gonna start like rapid firing things I remember. Like I said, this happened almost 10 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago now. So I don't really have like a chronological memory of the events that happened, but we'll just start with the basic rules. No jeans, no shorts, no leggings, no nothing other than skirts that were down to the ankles. They couldn't have slits in them because Brother David said slits are for sluts. We had to wear undershirts under literally everything. We had to wear pantyhose under our skirts so that nothing jiggled. For the first 30 days when you get there, you're on silence and restrictions. So silence is like you can't talk at all. If you stub your toe on a table and you say ow, then you're gonna get swats or you're gonna get more days added to your sentence. They take away your makeup, they take away your hair tools, they take away, I mean, basically everything. You're just like a ghost. You're a nobody. You're supposed to shut up, be quiet, follow around the older girl, and just observe and see how the girls live their life and what you're supposed to do. And then after 30 days of you observing, you get your stuff back, you're allowed to talk again, and you can finally like be a part of the home. I have a mouth on me, so I kept talking, and I actually ended up getting my sentence extended to 60 days. For 60 whole days, I could not speak. I could not make a sound for 60 days. Really, all of our days consisted of schoolwork, crocheting, practicing, remembering chapters upon chapters upon chapters of the Bible, because that was also part of our schooling. Practice singing different songs because Brother David and Miss Jen would take us around to different states throughout the country, and we would go to different churches and literally perform for them. Brother David would get up there and he would talk about how us girls in the girls' home lived such a troubled life and our parents didn't love us and blah, 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 blah. He basically just told sob stories about our lives. And then they would pass around like a love offering tray and they would put money in the tray, and all that money went to Brother David and Miss Jen. Whenever we got in trouble, we would receive something called swats. Brother David got like a thick, like literally like 1-inch thick sheet of oak wood and drilled a bunch of holes in it so when you swung it, like air would move through and it could swing faster. Basically, if you got in trouble, which was like literally for anything and everything, Brother David and Miss Jen would take you upstairs. Miss Jen would tell you why you're getting swats. She would say, we're now going to be administering blank amount of swats for blah, 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 blah. And then Brother David was always the one to give the swats. It was only Brother David that gave swats. My first time getting swats was like a week into being in the home. We had gone to Walmart and I was shadowing the oldest girl in the home. I decided I was going to buy mouthwash and a thing of baby wipes. The girl that I was shadowing, we'll call her R, she told me, Miss Jen's not going to let you buy that. And I said, well, Miss Jen's just gonna have to get over it. And that's what I got swats for. So we get home, they tell me to go upstairs, I go up there, we're now gonna administer blah, 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 blah. And then Brother David tells me to bend over and grab your ankles. I told him I can't grab my ankles, and he told me that's fine, then grab your knees. I don't remember it hurting as much as it just like feeling incredibly violating and like embarrassing. They had this place called the Solitary Room. It was a 3-story house, not including the basement. So I guess technically 4 stories, I don't really know. The solitary room was on the very top floor of the house. Just a completely empty room that you went into if you got into enough trouble. Only one girl ever went into the solitary room while I was there. And she was 18 at the time, by the way. She got put into solitary because she told the other girl, R, that was like the oldest girl in the home, she literally just said whatever to her, and then she had to get swats for having an attitude. But she's 18 years old and she's like, you're not gonna touch me with that. So she was fighting them back, just like trying not to get hit. I didn't see everything that happened, but we could hear everything that happened. We'll call her F. They were like fighting on the stairs. Brother David and Miss Jen were trying to like pin her down so they could whack her with the paddle. They ended up breaking the paddle on her. This is a thick oak paddle. They ended up breaking it, trying to hit her with it. And so Miss Jen had to resort to the ping pong paddle that she kept in her purse to try and swat her. In solitary, you have to wear all black, even to church. You're on silence. You're not allowed to speak. All you can do is just basically sit up there and do your schoolwork all day. She didn't eat meals with the rest of us girls. She ate upstairs after everybody else. Miss Jen would like cook plain unseasoned oatmeal, like literally just oats, nothing else in it. And she'd put it in a bowl and set it on the counter so it would get like cold and like clumped together, you know, just gross. And then they would pick one of us girls to go deliver the food to F. She also ate like canned artichokes and just like other really gross, unappealing foods like that. If I haven't already, I just want to apologize again if the story is all over the place. Like I said, I don't really have a chronological memory of events. I just kind of have to like pull random memories. Like I said, the schooling was called ACE, Accelerated Christian Education. They were like these thin little packets that you had to work through. You could kind of like pace yourself at your own speed. They were called paces actually. Like I said, I got placed in the 3rd grade, so I was obviously able to do them like really fast, but they would only let you do so many paces in such a short amount of time. So I only made it up, I think, to the 9th grade by the time I left the home. I left the home when I was 16 going on 17, and I had made it up to the 9th grade. We were only allowed to have one conversation a month with our parents. It was a 15-minute phone call that was supervised upstairs in Brother David's office. The phone call was on speaker so they could hear everything that you were saying, everything your parents was saying. If they didn't like what you were saying, then they would just hang up the phone. So we couldn't tell our parents about what was like happening in the home or anything like that because they would have just hung up the phone. And we probably would have got phone call privileges taken away. So none of us really even tried that. And I'm sure a lot of us didn't really feel like our parents would believe us or do anything about it. Backtracking a little bit, my parents actually dropped me off here, I think like 2 weeks before Christmas. So I spent Christmas there, 2 Christmases actually. Christmas, we didn't really celebrate anything. I don't remember if like the church had something going on or what, but like we didn't have a Christmas tree. We didn't do anything like that. A month with our parents. It was a 15-minute phone call that was supervised upstairs. Allowed to have one conversation a month with our parents. It was a 15-minute phone call that was supervised upstairs in Brother David's office. The phone call was on speaker so they could hear everything that you were saying, everything your parents was saying. If they didn't like what you were saying, then they would just hang up the phone. So we couldn't tell our parents about what was like happening in the home or anything like that because they would have just hung up the phone. And we probably would have got phone call privileges taken away. So none of us really even tried that. And I'm sure a lot of us didn't really feel like our parents would believe us or do anything about it. Backtracking a little bit, my parents actually dropped me off here, I think like 2 weeks before Christmas. So I spent Christmas there.